The for loop is one of the most often used loop constructs in C or C++. In fact, for me personally, I always use the for loop, even in situations where others may use a while loop. The most common use of the for loop is in a situation where the programmer wants the loop body to execute a certain number of times. In this code segment, the loop executes a certain number of times. Can you tell by looking at the code as to how many times exactly does the loop body execute in the above code segment? Let us now use the Eclipse IDE to illustrate how a for loop works. So this is the polygon drawing code which is written using a for loop instead of a repeat loop. Okay, so I'm going to press F11 now. To step through, it starts here, F6 for stepping across, and then F5, F5. It is going to ask me to enter the number of sides. Let me give 5. So I wanted to draw a pentagon. So let's see what happens. F5. Okay, so I'm going to show you the drawing window now. The drawing window is empty to begin with. Okay, so let me step through this wait. I'm sorry, I should step across F6. Okay, F6. Okay, so F6. Now still the drawing is empty. F6. Now it has drawn one line corresponding to this forward statement. F6 again. Now it has turned left, as you can see, and then it has gone back to the beginning of the for loop. Now let's execute the body once more. F6, F6, F6. As you can see, the second side of the pentagon is now drawn. For each iteration, it is going to draw one edge of the pentagon. 3 iterations completed and 3 edges of the pentagon have been drawn. Now let me now press F8 to complete instead of stepping through, and it will complete the execution. All 5 sides have been drawn. Alright, so that's how the for loop works. Now this kind of usage of the for loop is the most common use of the for loop, and that's why Simple CPP actually has a simplified version of the construct called repeat n, where the loop body of the loop is executed n times. This simplification in Simple CPP is done for the purpose of ease of learning for the novice programmer. The generic version of the for loop has 3 parts: an init statement, a condition to be checked before each iteration, and a statement to be executed implicitly at the end of each iteration. Thus a for loop can be replaced with an equivalent while loop as shown here, where the init condition comes here, init statement comes here, condition comes the same as the while condition, and this statement here is at the end of the while loop's body. Let's look at an example other than the default for loop. Here I have a for loop where I is initialized to 100 and we check whether I is lesser than 120 in the loop condition check, and at the end of each loop iteration we are going to increment I by a value of 2. So let's now see what happens when we execute it. F11, and I'm just going to execute the entire program by pressing F8. As you can see here, it has started with I equal to 100, then I equal to 102, 104 and so on until 118. 120 itself is not printed because 120 violates this condition of I less than 120. Each of these 3 parts can be empty, which means that any while loop also can be written as an equivalent for loop. Another common mode of usage of the for loop is where the loop counter decrements by 1 in each iteration. As a test of understanding, can you tell how many times does the loop body execute in the above code segment? one special note of caution here is to be careful about I greater than 0 versus I greater than or equal to 0. C and C++ also provide the increment and decrement operators plus plus and minus minus. Thus, I equal to I plus 1 is equivalent to I plus plus and I equal to I minus 1 is equivalent to I minus minus. I earlier told that a while loop and for loop are equivalent. One minor difference is that it is possible to have a variable inside a for loop whose scope is restricted within the loop body. So let's see what I mean by this. In this earlier example, I have used a loop index variable int I. So note that I have declared int I within the loop itself, and I am trying to access this same variable outside the loop after the loop has ended. Actually, Eclipse is so good that it is now indicating to me here that this I is actually invalid. There is no variable called I here. The scope of this int I is within the loop body. So if I try to run it by pressing F11, it is going to throw up an error. Okay. A word of caution here is that you should be very careful about reusing variable names. Suppose to fix this bug, I put an int I here equal to 0, the program would now be correct. Okay, so let's see what happens. It executes, okay, and however, at the end here, what is printed as I is I equal to 0, which is corresponding to this I. So it is confusing whether this I refers to the loop variable or the outside variable. So you should avoid such situations when you do programming. A for loop can be used to create an infinite loop by having empty statements for the loop condition. This is equivalent to saying while true. In fact, for semicolon semicolon is a common usage. Now can you tell as to how you can end an infinite for loop? Since break and continue statements can be used for loop control, I personally prefer the infinite for loop for most of my programming. In summary, in this video we have seen the for loop and the equivalence between the power of for and while loops. You can choose whichever is favorite to you. A special word of caution is with respect to the use of loop index variable with restricted scope.